Hello, future enrolled agents. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Again, this is Eloisa. So before we begin, gusto ko muna magpasalamat sa inyong lahat sa patuloy na pagsuporta nyo dito sa channel na to. I'm very much flattered na nakaka-receive ako ng magagandang feedback so far. And yun yung nagbibigay sa akin ng inspirasyon para mas ganahan pa ako na gumawa ng mas marami pang videos. Again, maraming salamat. Sa mga bago pa lang at ngayon pa lang nakita tong channel na to, I really hope that you will find this helpful in your journey towards becoming an enrolled agent. And sana makatulong din if currently nagpe-prepare na kayo ng US tax or may balak pa lang kayong matutunan ang preparation ng US tax. I hope this channel will contribute to that growth. No? So, in today's topic, we will be discussing the different filing statuses. So, last time, ang diniscuss natin, it's basically giving you an overview of the SEE or Special Enrollment Examination Part 1 that covers the tax preparation, gathering taxpayers data, like yung complete bio, profile, name, addresses, birth dates, etc. So today we will gonna have a closer look on the different filing statuses. So kung handa na kayo, let's begin. Okay, so for our learning objectives, at the end of this session, we should be able to determine the correct filing status. What are the different prerequisites to qualify for the head of household status, and understand who a qualifying person is. Okay, so there are 5 filing statuses. No, 5 lang siya. Okay, so single, married filing jointly, married filing separately or separate, MFS, head of household, and qualifying surviving spouse or QSS. So ayan, so kung familiar na kayo sa US 1040, makikita nyo sa taas, andito yung mga boxes na kailangan yung i-check kung ano ba yung filing status na gagamitin ng taxpayer. Again, it's very important, kasi maraming associated na related sa tax, sa pagpili pa lang, like yung standard deduction, yung mga relevant credits, ganyan, yung mga phase-out limits, related yan lahat, yung pati yung AGI, yung sa gross income nila na related din sa mga tax credits, ang reference nun yung filing status. Okay? Okay, sino ba yung single? Yung single. Okay, single, sabi ng IRS, you're single or your filing status is single if you're considered unmarried and you don't qualify for another filing status. Or you are legally separated under a decree of divorce or separate maintenance. Or legally divorced. Your filing status may be single if your spouse died before January 1, 2022. Kasi basically yung filing year or yung scope na itetest natin, diba, is from January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2022. So basically, yung taxpayer, yung activity niya during the year yon. So from January 1. So kung halimbawang namatay yung spouse, let's say December 31, hindi na yon kung mag-counted. So on the year of death, yung spouse, makakapag-file pa siya ng married filing jointly during the year. So yun. So yun yung tinatawag natin na single. Sabi niya, your filing status may be single if your spouse died before January 1, 2022 and you didn't remarry before the end of 2022. You may, however, be able to use another filing status that will give you a lower tax. No? So, pwede naman. It doesn't necessarily follow na single ka, hindi ka na mag-qualify. So, pwede ka mag-qualify as head of household. May mga conditions lang yun, may mga test ka lang na kailangan i-meet, no, para mag-qualify ka as head of household. Okay? Or qualifying surviving spouse later, no, nakikita natin, papakita ko sa inyo yung conditions kung ano-ano yung mga yon. Okay, so for example, okay, John and Jane lived together until June 15 when they separated. John filed for divorce on September 1 and their divorce became final on December 30, 2022. They do not have any dependents. So, kumbaga na-finalize yung divorce nila, may degree of finality na. They each must file single for 2022. No? The fact that the divorce became final before the end of 2022 for tax purposes, they are considered unmarried in 2022. So, halimbawa meron kayong client, no? Nangyayari yan, talagang hindi na sila magkasundo. Sometimes kumbaga parang yung client nyo or client mo or magiging client mo lumapit sa inyo, dati siyang halimbawang married filing jointly. So this year, no? Kumbaga parang hindi na sila magkasundo, yung pala nag-file na ng divorce. So, kung meron ng degree of finality, no? Ang magiging ano na nila nun, single na. No, malaya na sila. Okay, bumitaw na sila sa pagiging married. So, ang filing status na nila nun, single. Okay? Married filing jointly. Ito naman, sa mga mag-asawa. You can choose married filing jointly as your filing status if you're considered married and both of you or your spouse agree to file a joint return. On a joint return, you and your spouse report your combined income and deduct your combined allowable expenses. You can file a joint return even if one of you had no income or deductions. Okay, so meron ako nilagay dito, study note. No? MFJ is an election. So by default, hindi MFJ. Kumbaga, both spouses kasi kailangan nilang mag-agree. No, hindi po pwedeng isa lang may gusto tapos yung isa ayaw. So pag may isang ayaw, hindi sila po pwedeng mag-file ng MFJ. By default, ibig sabihin kumbaga yun yung nakaset, MFS sila, married filing separately. But if they decide na gusto nilang mag-MFJ, kailangan both spouses nag-a-agree. Okay? Considered married. You're considered married for the whole year if on the last day of your tax year, you and your spouse meet any of the following tests. No? So, laging last day of the year yung consideration. You are married and living together. Or you're living together in a common law marriage recognized in the state where you now live or in the state where the common law marriage began. So, yung common law doon, so meron silang common law, meron silang community property law. No? So, may mga states na nag-o-honor ng common law. Ano ba yung ibig sabihin nun? Na pag nagsasama kayo, not necessarily kasal. No? Pero you're representing yourself sa community na kasal, magkasama kayo, nakatira kayo sa isang bubong. Ang pakilala nyo sa mga friends nyo, sa mga neighbors nyo, mag-asawa kayo. So under a state na mayroong common law, no, considered as married kayo doon. No, hindi nyo na kailangan ng marriage license or marriage certificate. No? But doon sa mga hindi allowed or hindi nagpa-practice ng common law, yung pa rin, yung traditional pa rin, kailangan talaga kasal kayo. Okay? So, you are married and living apart but not legally separated under a decree of divorce or separate maintenance. Okay? Ang ibig naman sabihin nito, kahit na halimbawang naghiwalay na kayo, no, talagang hindi na kayo magkasundo. Naghiwalay kayo ngayon, naghiwalay kayo ng bahay. No, but it doesn't follow na kumbaga parang hindi na kayo kumbaga magbago yung filing status mo, hindi. No? So, considered as married pa rin kayo nun. Either mag-file pa rin kayo ng married filing jointly or married filing separately. Pero other than that, hindi. No? So, kailangan meron decree of finality. Okay? You are separated under an interlocutory, yun nga, not final decree of divorce. So, kumaga parang, halimbawa, nag-file kayo ng divorce, no? 2022, pero nag-grant 2023. No? So, sa 2022 na filing, hindi pa kayo divorce. Magte-take effect yon sa susunod na taon. Okay? Okay. Filing a joint return. Both you and your spouse must include all of your income and deductions on your joint return. So, kumbaga pagsasamahin niya talaga. So, lahat ng business, lahat ng income, no, ni husband and wife, pagsasamahin under one return. May mga conditions din, okay? So, kung magpa-file kayo ng joint return, okay, kailangan yung accounting period, sabi nga, both of you must use the same accounting period. Na hindi po pwedeng yung isa fiscal, yung isa calendar. Na calendar January 1 to this nag-e-end ng December 31. No, yung fiscal any day other than December 31 yung ending. So, hindi po pwedeng magkasaliwa. No, so kung calendar si wife, calendar din dapat, no, para pag pinag-combine yung income and expenses, pareha sila ng period. Okay? Pero pwedeng gumamit ng magkaibang accounting method. No, pwedeng halimbawa, may business si wife, ang ginagamit niya cash basis. No, may business si husband, ang ginagamit niya accrual method. Pwede yon. Pero pagdating sa accounting period, kailangan parehas. Kung calendar, calendar. Kung fiscal, fiscal. Hindi po pwedeng magkaiba. Okay? So, ito lang, no, just a refresher, no, accounting period, no, for tax purposes. So, most individual tax returns cover a calendar year or the 12 months from January 1 through December 31. If you don't use a calendar year, the accounting period is fiscal year. No? A regular fiscal year is a 12-month period that ends on the last day of any month, except December. No? Meron din 52-53 weeks. No? Ito naman yan. 52-53 week fiscal year varies from 52 to 53 weeks and always ends on the same day of the week. You choose your accounting period or your tax year when you file your first income tax return. It can't be longer than 12 months. No? So, yun yung rule natin for married filing jointly. Accounting method naman, again, your accounting method is the way you account for your income and expenses. Most taxpayers use either the cash method or the accrual method. You choose a method when you file your first income tax return. No? Kumbaga, ngayon, tawag dito, first year of filing mo. So, sabi mo, accrual method. So, dapat consistent yon. Kung gusto mong magbaguhin, merong form. No? Sabi nga, yung use form 3115 to request an accounting method change. Okay, so pwedeng cash, pwedeng accrual, pero kung halimbawa pinili mo na yon on your first year of filing, no, nagbago isip mo later on, kailangan mo nang mag-file ng form 3115, no, sa IRS para ma-change yung accounting method mo. Or inyong mag-asawa kung halimbawa gusto nyo magparehas. Okay? Filing a joint return, continuation. So, joint responsibility. No? Sabi dito, okay, both of you may be held responsible jointly and individually for the tax and any interest or penalty due on your joint return. This means that if one spouse doesn't pay the tax due, the other may have to. No? Or if one spouse doesn't report the correct tax, both spouses may be responsible for any additional taxes assessed by the IRS. One spouse may be held responsible for all the tax due even if all the income was earned by the other spouse. Okay, so yun lang yon. No? Kaya kailangan na requirement para mag-file, kailangan parehas kayong nag-a-agree. No? Kasi hati kayo dyan eh. Kung may penalty, parehas kayong mape-penalize. No? Kung may interest, parehas kayong magkakaroon ng interest, no? So kailangan may consent ng both parties, no? Kasi lahat talaga magkasama kayo, even yung mga penalties. Okay? You may want to file separately. Ito naman, may option naman hindi naman mandatory na filing jointly kayo parate. Meron kang choice, no? You may want to file separately if you believe your spouse isn't reporting all of their income, or you don't want to be responsible for any taxes due if your spouse doesn't have enough tax withheld or doesn't pay enough estimated tax. Okay? So, may choice naman. May choice ka naman. So, ang mangyayari nga lang dyan ganito, pagka halimbawa yung isang spouse nag-file na ng MFS, obligado ngayon. Hindi na po pwede mag-MFJ yung kabila. No? And another thing, mahahati, no? Yung standard deduction kasi MFS na kayo sa split na yan. And also, pagka halimbawa yung isang spouse no opt na maging instead of standard deduction nag-itemized deduction, hindi po pwedeng yung kabila mag-standard deduction. So kailangan i-follow mo kung itemized deduction ganun din. Ang sama nga lang kung halimbawa wala kang i-itemize, no? Wala kang expenses, wala kang medical expenses, wala kang mga casualties losses, ganyan. No, wala kang mga taxes na iba pang binayaran no, sa real mga property taxes, wala kang i-deduct, no? So that's the downside lang, no? Kapag MFS tapos yung spouse mo nag-file ng itemized deduction instead of standard deduction, wala kang choice. Zero yung ilalagay mo na deduction. No, as opposed kung parehas kayo, halimbawa, parehas na standard deduction, even if MFS, hahatiin mo lang yung standard deduction. Parang magiging single ang labas ng standard deduction ninyo. Okay? Okay. Ano naman mangyayari kapag namatay yung asawa? Okay? If your spouse died during the year, you are still considered married for the whole year for filing purposes. Okay? But kailangan hindi ka nag-remarry before the end of the tax year. Kung nag-remarry ka, pwede ka namang mag-file pa rin ng married filing jointly, kaya lang dun sa bago mo ng spouse. Okay? Hindi na dun sa namatay mong spouse. Ang mangyayari doon sa namatay na spouse, magpa-file naman siya ng MFS. No, last filing, na yun, kumbaga last or final tax return niya na yun. Okay? Kasi hindi na siya pwedeng MFJ sa'yo, may iba ka ng asawa. Okay? For the next 2 years, no, you may be entitled to the special benefits described later dun sa qualifying surviving spouse naman. Okay, so another filing status yun. If you remarried before the end of the tax year, you can file a joint return with your new spouse. Your deceased spouse filing status is married filing separately for that year. Okay? Divorced person, ito naman. If you are divorced under a final decree by the last day of the year, you are considered unmarried. Now, for those whole year, and you can choose married filing jointly as your filing status. So, kahit na December 31, as soon as mayroon ng decree of finality, considered as, done na yun. Kumbaga, as in, wala ka na, hindi mo na pwedeng i-revert, no, sa MFJ. Ang magiging filing status mo na nun, either single, no, or kung may magko-qualify ka as head of household, pwede din. Isingit ko lang guys, no, iba naman kapag annulment. No, iba yung divorce, iba yung annulment. Sa annulment, 'di ba, from the word na kumbaga parang naging null, no, parang as if walang marriage na nangyari. So kung nakapag-file kayo as husband and wife, no, doon sa mga years na yon, kailangan mo siyang i-amend. Okay, magfa-file kayo ng 1040X. No, kasi kumbaga walang marriage, no, doon sa mga years na yon. Therefore, no, kasi kumbaga kinonsider yung marriage as null and void, no, as if hindi kayo nagpakasal. No, so lahat ng affected years na yon, kung saan ang dineclare nyo or ang filing status na ginamit nyo ay married filing jointly, kailangan yon ma-amend. Okay, so that's the difference between divorced, no, tsaka yung annulment. Sa divorce, pag nagkaroon ng decree of finality, magiging unmarried ka lang. Pero, kumbaga, hindi mo kailangan i-amend. No, you can choose, no, ang magiging filing status mo either head of household or single. Head of household, kailangan mo lang masatisfy yung mga ibang mga test and conditions, no, but pwede, no. Okay, sa annulment, as if walang marriage na nangyari, kailangan mong mag-amend. Okay? Okay. Paano kung ayaw nung asawa mo na mag-file ng MFJ? Wala kang magagawa. No, kasi kailangan mag-conform. Magsasign kayong parehas nun sa return eh. Hindi siya pipirma. So, hindi ka rin makakapag-file ng MFJ. No? So, if one spouse does not wish to file MFJ, then both spouses must default to MFS. Hindi mo naman pwedeng pikein yung pirma ng asawa mo. Bawal yon. No? So, wala kang choice. Kung ayaw ng wife or ayaw ng husband mo na mag-file ng MFJ, by default, no, MFS ang magiging filing status nyo. Okay? So, before mag-proceed dito sa rules from joint responsibility, hindi naman, again, nabanggit ko to sa last na video, na hindi naman required na MFJ ka, kung nag-file ka ngayon MFJ, next year MFJ, hindi. Now, pwede every year, pwede mabago. Depende sa situation. At the end of the day, no, kung alin yung magbe-benefit kayo, no, tax-wise, kung ano yung mas makakapagpababa ng taxes nyo, no? At kung halimbawa may mga instances na yung threshold or yung limit mahihit, mababawasan yung mga credits, yun yung mga cases na kumbaga they rather file ng MFS kesa sa MFJ, no? Kasi nga kumbaga during that year mas favorable yung MFS, no? So it's a case to case, no? It can change every year depende sa situation. Okay? So, ito naman, kung halimbawa nakapag-file kayo ng MFJ, may mga relief naman, relief from joint responsibility. Ibig sabihin, kung halimbawa may mga penalties, may mga assessments, ganyan, pwede naman, kumbaga parang may remedy naman, no? Kung sakali malagay yung taxpayer sa situation na gano'n. Okay? So, relief from joint responsibility. In some cases, one spouse may be relieved of joint responsibility for tax interest and penalties on joint return for items of the other spouse that were incorrectly reported on the joint return. No? You can ask for the relief no matter how small the liability is. Okay? There are 3 types of relief available. So, number 1, yung innocent spouse relief. No? Number 2, separation of liability. And number 3, equitable relief. No? Yung separation of liability, available only to joint filers whose spouse has died or who are divorced, legally separated, or haven't lived together for the 12 months ending on the date the election for the relief is filed. Okay? May separate form din. No? Kung sa tingin mo na ang tawag dito, kailangan mo or pwedeng kumbaga parang naapektuhan ka, for example, may mga penalties or may mga charges or meron silang mga undeclared na natatakot ka dahil hindi ka naman aware, no, na may mga ganun pala mga illegal na mga transaction yung asawa nyo. So meron naman, no, may pwedeng remedy, no. So depende sa situation, these are the available reliefs, no. So innocent spouse relief, separation of liability, and equitable relief. Magpa-file lang kayo ng Form 8857, no, for innocent spouse relief. To request relief from joint responsibility. So mag-refer kayo dun sa publication 971 for the details. No, mahaba-haba basahin nyo. No? Innocent spouse relief explains these kinds of relief and who may qualify for them. Okay? So publication 971. Okay. Another filing status, married filing separately. No, as mentioned earlier, by default, no, married filing separately talaga ang filing status ng mag-asawa unless i-elect nila. So, yung MFJ, it's an election. No, kailangan may consent parehas nung spouse, both spouses nag-a-agree na mag-file sila ng MFJ. Kung wala, by default, or may isang party na ayaw, by default, ang filing status, married filing separately. Okay? So, you can choose married filing separately as your filing status if you're married. Kailangan naman single ka tapos MFS, di ba? So, kailangan married muna. This filing status may benefit you if you want to be responsible only for your own tax. Yun nga, no? Kung may duda ka na may ginagawa yung asawa mo, kalokohan, ganyan, ayaw mong madamay. No? So, kung ayaw mong madamay, ang filing status mo, MFS. Okay? Taxpayers who are married and either, ito yung mga pwede mag-qualify. Hindi pwede mag-qualify. Kumbaga, ano yung mga pwede mong gawin. You can choose to file separate returns or you do not agree, no, to file jointly. Kumbaga, yun nga, kumbaga kanya-kanya kayong buhay, no? Ayaw mong pakialaman yung business niya, yung negosyo niya, so sariling file niya, no? Wala kang kinalaman kung magka-problema yun, ma-assess yun, ma-audit yun, magkaroon ng mga penalties, charges yun, wala kang pakialam dun sa business ng asawa mo. No? So, sariling business mo, sariling income mo, sariling filing mo, MFS ka. Okay? If one spouse, ito na, yung kaninang sinabi ko, if one spouse choose to file MFS, wala kang choice. The other is forced to do the same. Hindi po pwedeng yung isa MFS, ikaw MFJ. No? So, kung may naunahan ka, nauna siyang nag-file MFS, diba? Hindi kayo nag-uusap, kahiwalay kayo ng bahay, pero hindi naman kayo divorce, nauna siya ngayong nag-file, inunahan ka. No, ang filing status na MFS, o no choice ka. Filing status mo na rin, MFS. Okay. Siyempre may mga rules naman, no? Not necessarily na rules, but these are the consequences pag nag-file ka ng MFS. Hindi naman lahat favorable. May mga talagang may possible na ma-sacrifice, may possible na hindi mo na ma-avail or ma-disallow because or mabawasan because you're filing MFS. So, number 1 nga dyan yung standard deduction. So, sa MFJ, kumbaga, hahatiin. No? Parang ang standard deduction ng MFS ngayon, parang single na lang. So, bababa. So, that's 1. Okay. Another thing, ito yun, if you choose married filing separately as your filing status, the following special rules apply. Because of these special rules, you usually pay more tax. Babayad ka na mas malaki. Kasi nga, number 1, bababa yung standard deduction mo. On separate tax return, then if you use another filing status, you qualify for. No? Your tax rate is generally higher than a joint return. Your exemption amount for figuring the alternative minimum tax is half that allowed on a joint return. You can take credit for child and dependent care expenses in most cases. And the amount you can exclude from income under the employer's dependent care assistance program is limited to 2,500 instead of 5,000 on a joint return. However, if you're legally separated or living apart from your spouse, you may able to file a separate return and still take the credit. Okay, so again, for more information, you can check yung publication 503. No? Yun nga, nahahati, nababawasan, may mga consequences. So, kailangan as tax professional na may lalapit sa inyo, kailangan alam nyo ano yung mga pros and cons. No? So, halimbawa, may available na ibang filing status. Like, halimbawa, single. Diba? Pero, meron siyang, mamaya, didiscuss natin yung sa head of household. But, meron siyang mga sinusuportahan and possibly mag-qualify sa head of household. So, kailangan alam natin yung rules. Alam natin yung condition, paano mamimit yon. Kasi, pwedeng mag-avail yung taxpayer ng higher na deduction. Okay? And merong mga associated pa na iba pang benefits, no? Like tax, mga credits, ganyan, na po pwede. So, as professionals, yun yung kailangan natin maintindihan. Okay? Another thing, no? Pagka MFS ka, disadvantage, you can take the earned income credit unless you were separated from your spouse at the end of 2022 and meet certain requirements. For more information about these requirements, okay, so nandun naman sa rule ng filing status, married filing separately, nandun sa publication 596, meron naman separate reading on earned income credit or yung EIC. Okay? Another disadvantage, you can take the exclusion of credit for adoption expenses in most cases. May mga special circumstances naman. Okay? You can take the education credits, no? Yung AOC, American Opportunity Credit and Lifetime Learning Credit, or the deduction for student loan interest. No? So, hindi ka pwede doon kapag ka MFS. You can't exclude any interest income from qualified U.S. saving bonds you use for higher education expense. So, hindi rin pwede. So, maraming consequences kapag ka MFS. So, may advantages, may disadvantages. You just have to weigh alin yung magiging favorable, no, dun sa taxpayer. Okay, continuation, no? MFS. If you live with your spouse at any time during the tax year, you can't claim the credit for the elderly or the disabled. You must include income in greater percentage up to 85% of any social security or equivalent railroad retirement benefits you receive. So, merong separate topic dyan. So, computation naman nung tawag dito, nung sa taxability ng mga social security benefits. Okay? The following credits and deductions are reduced at income levels, half of those for a joint return. Again, ito ulit, mga tax credits na associated. Child tax credit and the credit for other dependents, retirement savings contributions credit. Another disadvantage, capital loss deduction limit is 1,500, no, instead of 3,000. And usually, kunyari, nagbenta ng mga stocks, ganyan, or yung mga investments, no, kung may mga losses, imbes na 3,000 ang pwede mong i-offset, nare-reduce 1,500 na lang. Okay? And ito yung nabanggit ko kanina, if your spouse itemizes deductions, you can claim the standard deduction. So, pag itemize siya, kailangan itemize ka rin. Yun nga, ang downside kung wala kang i-itemize. Okay? If you can claim the standard deduction, your basic standard deduction is half of the amount allowed on joint return. So, yun nga, magmumukha na lang single, yung standard deduction. Okay. So, head of household. Okay. A taxpayer who qualifies to file as head of household will usually have a lower tax rate than a single or married filing separately and will receive a higher standard deduction. The HOH status is available to taxpayers who meet all, no? In all caps ko guys ha, all. Hindi pwedeng isa, hindi pwedeng dalawa. Kung lahat, ang kailangan mo ma-meet dyan, lahat ng rules. So, kailangan kabisado nyo to. No? Kasi pag may mga questions, yun nga, bibigyan kayo ng situation. Tapos pag may isang hindi na meet up, hindi na po pwede. Hindi ka na pwede mag-qualify as HOH. Okay? So, kailangan ma-meet lahat. Okay? All of the following requirements. Number 1, the taxpayer must be single, divorced, legally separated, or considered unmarried on the last day of the year. So, mamaya, di-define natin ano ba yung unmarried na yan. The taxpayer must have paid more than half of the cost of keeping up a home for the year. Okay? The taxpayer must have had a qualifying person living in their home for more than half of the year. So, yun yung mga conditions. Balikan natin. Taxpayer must be single, divorced, legally separated, or considered unmarried on the last day of the year. The taxpayer must have paid more than half of the cost of keeping up a home for the year. And last, the taxpayer must have had a qualifying person living in their home for more than half of the year. So, yung tatlong kondisyones na yan, kailangan masatisfy para ma-avail mo or mag-qualify ka sa head of household na status. Okay? So, yung sa last rule, the taxpayer, yung sa second rule na, last rule na the person living in their home for more than half of the year. No, it doesn't necessarily mean na pag hindi nakatira for the whole year or more than half of the year, hindi pwede mag-qualify. So may mga exceptions tayo. Temporary absences. So kunwari may anak ka, nag-aaral, nagbo-board, meron dorm, no? So hindi ibig sabihin na porke hindi nakatira yung anak mo sa bahay nyo, hindi na siya qualifying person. So pwede pa rin siya mag-qualify. Okay? Kasi considered as ano lang yon, temporary absence lang yon. No, yung nag-aaral tapos umuuwi lang halimbawa during summer or during Christmas, ganyan. Kasi nga nagdo-dorm, no, wala sa bahay nyo, malapit sa school or nasa school nakatira. Okay? Number 2, qualifying parent who does not have to live with the taxpayer. No? Hindi naman kailangan nakatira ang parents mo para maging qualifying person. No? Pwedeng nasa ospital kasi of old age na or nasa mga nursing homes. So, pwede pa rin siya mag-qualify as qualifying dependent. Pwede ka pa rin makonsider as head of household pag may ganyang situation. Okay? Ito naman, sino-sino ba yung qualifying parent? Hindi naman kailangan biological. No? So, ang definition ng IRS sa qualifying parent, pwedeng, of course, yung actual, biological parents mo, number 1. No? Pero pwede rin, no? Yung step-parent, yan. In-laws, grandparent, no? Who is related to the taxpayer by blood, adoption, or marriage. Yan, yung critical, tandaan nyo to guys, na nilagyan ko na ng acronym, BAM. So, pagka head of household, isipin nyo parati, ang unang dapat papasok sa isip nyo, BAM. Okay? By blood, no? Kadugo mo, by adoption, okay? Usually, do sa mga foster child, no? Yung mga na-adopt, okay? Or by marriage, no? Katulad nun, by marriage. Kaya mo lang siya naging parent because in-laws mo. So, by marriage. Okay, so, acronym natin dyan, BAM, blood, adoption, or marriage. Okay, so magbigay tayo ng example. So, Maggie is single, but she's financially supporting her mother, Annie, who lives in her own house. Annie dies on March 15, 2022. Maggie can claim Annie, yung nanay niya, as dependent and file as head of household even though her mother was not alive the entire year. So, pwede pa rin yun, no? Kahit na namatay na, basta during the year, no, yung nire-report natin or yung gagawa natin ng tax return na year. So, in this case, 2022. Another example, Elena is 48 years old and pays for the monthly bill for Elders Haven Nursing Home for her 80-year-old father, Tony. Tony has lived in the nursing home for several years and has no income. Since Elena is paying for more than half of the cost of her father's living expenses, Elena qualifies for head of household filing even though her father lives in a retirement home. Ito yung kaninang exception na hindi kailangan nakatira sa bahay mo. No? Pwedeng nasa hospital, no? Or nasa mga nursing home or retirement home. Okay? Okay, considered unmarried. Again, to qualify for head of household status, you must be either unmarried or considered unmarried, no, on the last day of the year. So, December 31, halimbawa. You're considered unmarried on the last day of the year if you meet, again, ito na naman yung all. No? Hindi pwedeng isa, hindi pwedeng dalawa, all. No? All of the following tests. Number 1, you file a separate return. A separate return includes a return claiming married filing separately, single, or head of household filing status. you paid more than half of the cost of keeping your home for the tax year. Now, keyword doon, more than half. Sa test lalabas, sasabihin, the taxpayer is paying 50%. Hindi qualified yun. Kasi ang rule, more than 50%, more than half. So, pag 51%, okay. Pag flat na 50%, kasi minsan tricky yung question. Sasabihin, nagbabayad siya 50% or half. Malilito ka. So, kailangan, alam mo na more than half ang rule. Hindi saktong 50, more than half. So, 51% or 50.1. Okay, pwede na yon. Basta more than half. Okay? Your spouse didn't live in your home during the last 6 months of the year. Your spouse is considered to live in your home even if your spouse is temporarily absent due to special circumstances. Your home was the main home of your child, stepchild, or foster child for more than half of the year. Okay? Or be able to claim an exemption for the child. So, ito yung considered as unmarried. Ano-ano naman yung mga valid expenses? Kasi sinabi natin, kailangan siya yung nagbabayad ng at least or sumusuport ng at least more than half, no, of yung cost of keeping up a home. Okay? Kasi head of household eh. 'Di ba? So, ikaw yung parang breadwinner. No? Ikaw yung halos lahat ikaw na. 'Di ba? So, ano yung mga valid na mga gastos? No? Cost you can include, no? Not to be considered, or yung consideration for the more than 50% na support. Include the cost of keeping up a home expenses such as rent, mortgage, interest, real estate taxes, insurance on the home, repairs, utilities, and food eaten in the home. Hindi kasama yung clothing. Hindi kasama yung education, medical treatment, insurance, vacations, or transportation. Okay, ang tip dito, tandaan nyo, ano yung, kumbaga, kailangan sa bahay. 'Di ba? Rent. Siyempre, indirekta yan, nagbabayad ka ng rent. Mortgage, interest. Kunyari, niloan yung bahay sa bangko, binabayaran nyo sa bangko yung mortgage, interest, ganyan. Yung amilya, real estate taxes, no? Yung insurance ng bahay, no? Yung repairs, no? Yung utilities, ayan, pati yung pagkain. So again, yun lang yon ang pagbabasihan ng more than 50%. Okay? Hindi kasama, hindi valid expense yung clothing, education, medical treatment, insurance, vacations, or transportation. So kailangan as tax preparers, alam natin yan. Hindi pag binigyan ka ng client or ng taxpayer, ito yung mga pinagkagastosan ko, pag tingin mo, puro bumili ng bag, bumili ng sasakyan, or bumili ng ganito, ganyan, na hindi naman kasama dun sa mga valid expenses, hindi po pwedeng i-consider yon sa computation. Okay? So, ito yung example ng worksheet na makikita nyo din sa IRS, sa publication. So, yan, property taxes, mortgage interest expenses, rent, yung mga nakalista natin kanina. So, kung baga kukunin yung percentage no, ikaw yung sumasagot versus doon sa overall expenses. So, kung limbawa $10,000 siya, so yung more than half niyan, syempre, at least 5,100 man lang. Diba? Okay? Ito naman, who is a qualifying person? No? Kasi, di ba, one of the rules kanina, kailangan may qualifying person siyang sinusuportahan or nakatira din doon sa bahay niya, at least for more than half o half of the year, no? So, to be considered as a qualifying person for HOH status purposes, the person must be generally related to the taxpayer by either blood, adoption, or marriage. Yun nga, bam. Imagine nyo na, isipin nyo na yan, bam. Okay? So, qualifying child, syempre, anak. Diba? A married child who can be claimed as dependent. No? So, pwede pa rin i-claim as dependent kahit nakasal na, especially for those na walang income, nakatira pa rin sa bahay, no? Yung mga minors, kumaga, nag-asawa ng maaga, walang trabaho, nakatira pa rin sa bahay nila, sinusuportahan pa rin, yan. Pwede pa pumasa as a dependent. Okay? A dependent person. Dependent is yung may mga kapansanan, yung may mga hindi kayang, kumbaga may mga sakit na hindi nila kailangan, kumbaga na hindi nila kayang mabuhay mag-isa. Okay? So, yon, dependent person. Qualifying relative who meets certain relationship tests. So, merong pagka hindi diretsong qualifying child, married child, dependent person, may mga certain test ulit. Kumbaga, ini-scrutinize, hindi basta-basta na kahit sino na lang ginawa mong dependent para maging head of household. So, may mga certain relatives na po pwede, but again, i-scrutinize na naman yan. Meron na namang another test. Yung mga diretso, yung mga clear, ito yon, qualifying child, married child, who can be claimed as dependent person. Okay? Yung foster child also qualifies if the child was legally placed. Now, take note of the word legally placed in the home by government or agency. Hindi po pwedeng basta na lang. Alam mo yon, inampun mo, walang papers. Okay, so kailangan legally placed in the home by government or agency para ma-consider talaga na foster child. Okay, so again, ito may table dito. Under ito, makikita nyo to sa publication 17. Okay, na nandyan yung parang, paano mo malalaman para ma-consider siya as qualifying person. Okay? Next. Okay, ito naman. Qualifying surviving spouse. Okay? Last year, ang tawag dito, qualifying widow or widower. So, ngayon, QSS na siya. Qualifying surviving spouse. Okay? If one spouse dies during the tax year, the survivor can file married filing jointly on the year of death, no? If they otherwise qualify for the status. The year of death is the last year to file jointly with the deceased spouse. In certain cases, qualifying surviving spouse is the filing status for the 2 tax years following the year a spouse died. Okay? The qualifying surviving spouse filing status entitled the surviving spouse to use a joint return tax rate. So, ma-avail pa rin niya. Okay? And the highest standard deduction amount if not itemizing deductions. To file as a qualifying surviving spouse, the taxpayer must meet all, again, ito na naman yung word na all. Sabi niya, sana all. So, all of the following tests. Okay? Number 1, must be entitled to file a joint return when the spouse for the year the spouse died. Okay? Number 2, must not remarry before the end of the year. No? Kasi syempre kung nag-remarry ka, married filing jointly ka doon sa bago mong spouse. Yung sa succeeding years nun, either MFS ka or MFJ ka, doon sa current na spouse mo, kung nag-asawa ulit. Okay? Must have a child or stepchild. So in this case, okay, take note, hindi foster child. Okay? Pagka QSS, pagka sa mga surviving spouse, kailangan anak or stepchild. Anak nung asawa mo, no, na stepchild mo. Pero hindi foster child. So, iba to dun sa kanina sa head of household. Sa head of household, pwede yung foster child na maging dependent mo. Dito sa QSS, kailangan anak mo or stepchild. Okay? Whom they can claim as dependent or could claim as dependent. Again, yung rule then, a child live in the person's home all year except for temporary absences. So, recap. So, on the year of death, ang filing status mo, MFJ ka pa rin dun sa deceased spouse unless mag-remarry ka. So, MFJ ka dun sa bago mong spouse. So, kung hindi ka nag-remarry, MFJ ka on the year of death, the following year, qualifying surviving spouse, ang susunod pa, kumbaga 2 consecutive years after the year of death, QSS. Na yung susunod na nun, on the 3rd, pwedeng single or head of household. No, kung ano man yung applicable at magbibigay ng mas magandang tax position ulit. No? So, yun yung ano natin for QSS. Okay. Example, A spouse died in 2020. A hasn't remarried. During 2021 and 2022, A continued to keep up a home for A and A's child who lives with A and whom A can claim as the dependent. For 2020, A was entitled to file a joint return for A and A's deceased spouse. Okay, so yun yung year of death. For 2021 and 2022, A can file as qualifying surviving spouse. After 2022, A can file as head of household if A qualifies or single, just in case. No? So, yun yung ano natin, year of death, MFJ, 2 subsequent years, QSS on the third, either HOH or single, kung magka-qualify as HOH. Okay? Okay, nandito na tayo sa dulo. Okay? So guys, ito lang, no? Sa bawat lesson, hina-highlight ko yung talagang dapat ninyong tandaan. No? Lalo na sa mga yung kaninang binabanggit ko, yung mga possible na mga trick questions. So, sa head of household, kailangan tandaan nyo yung mga rules, lalo na nakalagay all. No? Hindi po pwedeng isa o dalawa lang yung masatisfy. Pag meron dong na-miss or hindi na-satisfy, hindi pwedeng mag-qualify. So, to recap, okay, filing status, 5 lang. Hindi 6, hindi 7, 5 lang. Single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, na mali ako ng spell. HOH yan guys, hindi HOA. Sorry na, mali. Head of household, okay, qualified surviving spouse. Pagod ng lol. Mali spelling. Okay, head of household. Taxpayer must be single, divorced, legally separated, or considered as unmarried at the end of the year. The taxpayer must have paid more than half of the cost of keeping up the home for the year. Okay? The taxpayer must have a qualifying person living in their home for more than half of the year. Okay? So, yun yung sa head of household. Qualifying person naman. Again, tandaan nyo, must be generally related to the taxpayer by blood, adoption, marriage. Bam. Bam. Okay? Qualifying person. It could be a qualifying child, married child that can be claimed as dependent parent, or qualifying relative that meets certain relationship tests. Okay, so yung mga yan, napaka-importante. Either sa practice or dun sa preparation nyo for the exam. No? Kasi dyan pa lang, no, kumbaga madami ng magiging repercussion, marami na magiging effects kung mamamali tayo, no, sa pagpili, no, ng filing status, no. So in relation do sa nakaraan natin, kaya nga natin ini-interview yung client, kaya nga tayo nagpapadala ng questionnaire sa client para mag-gather yung mga information na yon, no. Kaya tayo nagpe-perform ng due diligence, para makuha natin yung tamang information from the taxpayer para mas magawa natin ng tama yung kanilang tax return. So, yun lang guys, no? So, again, I hope that in this session you're able to achieve yung mga sinabi natin na learning objectives kanina, and I really hope na meron kayong mga bagong natutunan. So, I encourage pa rin, no, na i-share nyo tong video natin, no? Inform nyo yung mga colleagues, friends nyo, especially for those na talagang gustong matuto at ma-explore ang US tax. Hindi lang para sa exam, kumbaga para din sa trabaho, no? Lalo na ngayon maraming naghahanap ng or mga jobs na naghahanap, nagre-require ng may US tax return preparation experience ka. So again, this is one way of learning and achieving yung position na yan, just in case. Okay, so again, maraming salamat sa panonood ninyo, and sana magkita-kita ulit tayo sa susunod na video. Makikiusap lang uli ako sa inyo. Okay, nakikisuyo lang, lambing lang. Don't forget to subscribe kung hindi pa kayo nagsasubscribe sa YouTube channel natin, no? And I just like to remind na meron din tayong Facebook group, no? Yung Enrolled Agents Academy. Meron din tayong website, yung Enrolled Agents Philippines. Doon ko nilalagay yung mga materials, no? Kino-convert namin into downloadable na mga PDF format para meron kayong reference, no? And meron din akong LinkedIn, no? You can check my LinkedIn bio. Connect tayo, no? Doon sa Facebook group, I encourage na kung may mga tanong kayo at meron kayong gusto i-clarify dito sa topic na to, please feel free to ask me dun sa Facebook group. So, yun lang mga kapatid. Maraming salamat and I hope to see you on the next lesson. Stay tuned for more. Have a great day. God bless. Thank you. MFS.